Welcome to the Marty and Jaden Show. I'm Marty, this is Jaden, and we have just read more Brandon Sanderson. We are preparing for the launch, the expected launch of The Secret Project. We know what is coming out. Actually, we do not. We are suspecting what is coming out. But in preparation for what we are expecting, we read The Sixth of the Dusk. And we expect that this new secret project will probably be in that world, a continuation of it, and somehow, I think we got a hint from Sanderson.
That's what people keep saying. There's a lot of comments on other, especially on Brandon Sanderson's announcement video, that it's like, oh, it's an extension of Sixth of the Dusk. Why? Do you have any idea why? Is that?
Well, let's jump into the book and talk about it, and then we'll get there. I think it's a lot to do with how it leaves.
Okay, so you'll answer the question at the end of the video.
On what I think.
Okay, well, I guess you have to watch the whole video.
You got to get there. So we're going to go through our reactions.
Okay,
we'll chat about it. Jaden read it for his first time.
Yep.
I've read it before. I love these short stories from Arcanum Unbounded. I think they're fantastic.
I think I'm always surprised at how short they end up being. I feel like I start listening to the short story and I'm like, okay, getting into it. I'm starting to get the rhythm of the Brandon Sanderson, and it's like a lot happens and then it ends.
Yeah, you're like, whoa.
So yeah, I mean the whole story with Sixth of the Dusk is like 2 hours.
Yeah, well, you got to fit a Sanderlanche in there,
even
if you
big reveal right at the end.
Yeah, even if it's only 2 hours. So
wild.
Yeah,
but it was good. Yeah, I really liked it. It was an interesting setting, which I thought was cool.
Yeah,
and I think I can't remember if it was in Arcanum Unbounded or if it was something else that I read or watched, maybe by Brandon Sanderson afterward. But they talk about kind of wanting to have different types of worlds and different types of people and different things and how to.
Yeah,
I think one of the things in this book was like, I want to get creative and make a book about someone who just doesn't talk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's so cool to see that he's like, how do I stretch the limits of my creativity while keeping everything contained inside of one Cosmere? That's all based on like real, I wouldn't say physics, but like there's a physics behind the magic.
Yeah.
There's something behind everything that happens.
The rules that he has created.
He established the rules, and then he's allowing himself to be massively creative within those rules, which I think is so cool. I'm not a fantastic author, so I respect and I really love how cool it is to see. So that was one thing from Six of the Dusk that I appreciated because it was so different.
Oh yeah, it's pretty crazy the type of things that they introduce. And we're going to have big spoilers for Six of the Dusk. Yeah. If you have not read it, it's 2 hours long. What have you done? Like, just go out and read it.
Sorry,
he doesn't talk.
That was a pre-spoiler.
Well,
kind of.
He does talk. Yeah, it's not really a big spoiler, but
okay.
He's not a talkative person.
It's prepping them to read it if they haven't already.
True. If you're not a talkative person, you may relate with Six of Dusk.
If you're not a talkative person and
you happen to be some warrior from the islands,
but also just a quiet person.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool. But so you learn a lot about what it is to be a trapper right at the beginning. And
is it a trapper? It's a trapper, right?
Yeah, he's a trapper.
Good.
And can I just say, so many times we've ragged on books that like just tell you stuff and it just bothers you.
Yeah.
This is very much a show, and you just see it happen. You experience it through his eyes naturally.
Yep.
Instead of him saying at the beginning like, do some like cop-out flashback where they're like, oh, flashing back to his training, and then his coach just goes through all the things that a trapper is. Like, that's the easy road.
Yep.
But little things just sneak in as you go. Like you just didn't know. You didn't even think about the fact that he doesn't speak really until he goes to speak 3/4 of the way in, and he's like, oh.
Yeah.
He's thrown off by the fact that he has to speak. So I think it was cool to see his character. But you learn about his character as he experiences new things, not just flashing back to old stuff.
Oh, yeah. And one of the ways that they do this really creatively is when he stumbles upon one of the trappers that are dead.
Yep.
And he's able to dig out the notebook, and it tells him where all of his birds are at. And then in this moment, you know that, like, oh, the trappers are always trying to kill each other.
Yep.
But if one does die, they're like, take care of my birds.
And you understand how important the AVR, is it AVR?
AVR, yeah.
Yes, the AVRs are, like, the birds and how pivotal that is. Like, they're willing to give it to, he mentions this near the end as he's explaining it to, darn, what's her name?
Something. Yeah.
As he's explaining it to his new acquaintance.
Yes.
That even though like you recognize that it's your arch enemy, right? And that arch enemy just killed you, you're still hey, these birds are incredibly important. You can't just let them go hungry. Like, even if my enemy has to have them, they're not gonna just let them die. Basically,
they take care
because
of
they're very dependent on humans, right?
I think the ones that are trained, they are. Yeah, so they would
the ones
die
that he
without
mentions,
them.
exactly. They just would not be able to function. So you have to have someone take care of them. I guess that must happen over time in that symbiotic relationship.
Exactly. Yeah, I loved all that. So I'm dying to ask you this right now. So, do you recognize the AVR from any other book we've read?
Oh man. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Give me a second.
Did you notice it while you were reading it? You may not have, but
I did not notice it while I was reading it.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. But now I'm thinking. From any other book that I've read?
Yes. It's okay if you can't remember. We actually may have not read much of it yet in our reread. Nope. Thinking.
I am thinking it. It's gonna be like I don't know. Dang it! I hate saying I don't know.
No, it's okay.
You win.
It's okay. It's okay.
What is it?
When this is one of those books that will be really fun that you just read.
Okay.
When we go into Oathbringer and into Words of Radiance.
Okay.
Because the character Maraise walks around with a
bird.
green bird. They call it a chicken. Definitely not a chicken. By the way,
there's two chickens. They fight each other.
Yeah. So that is in the later books. I think that's book 3 in Oathbringer.
I think it might be very end.
Yeah.
It's not like a pivotal character point.
No, not a big moment, but you realize that these are birds that you'll start seeing them in different places.
Oh, because you're right. It mentions that he's like, is that bird talking to him or something?
Yeah,
like that?
exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, I did not. I think the chicken thing really threw me off.
I know
because they literally describe it as that the whole time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you'll find in the Stormlight books there are chickens that are actually chickens, and then there are birds that are not chickens, but they call them chickens.
Which makes sense if they have no context.
Yeah, they have no idea. So everything's a chicken to them.
Maraise is so interesting.
Yeah. So Maraise has got his green AVR that grants him some sort of gift, which is crazy. Yeah. And so crazy when you think in context at the end of this book, like how other worlds are trying to like get the AVR and like they realize how important they are.
I'm really curious to see when you say how important they are, because it reads very much like its own story, like its own, fun little story. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's an interesting power. And then by the end of it, you're like, well, they're basically willing to tear everything down to get these birds and figure out the secret of why these birds work the way they work.
Yeah. So
I'm like, whoa, hold on. Like, this is really important.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that, so obviously this, again, spoilers, but it's only 2 hours long. You just pause this and go and read it real quick.
I know.
But the end, which I loved, is that concept of like, these off-worlders, whatever they call them, they can't trade with us because we're not sufficiently advanced. There's some sort of hierarchical rule of the Cosmere that says, don't mess with the developing planet, basically.
Yeah. Feels very Star Trek.
Yes, exactly. It's like you can't go down and just obliterate these guys and take their stuff because you have to let them, there's some sort of accord.
Yep.
And they go in and they're like, okay, well, we'll just send them this machine and we'll just leave all the instructions and a translation thing so they can just kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, yeah, it's perfect. Like, this is great. And the scientists are all like, oh, we're so smart. They left this for us. And only those two people realize. She only realizes because Sixth tells her. Is it Sixth or Dusk? What would you call him?
I think in the book they call him Dusk, but I think Sanderson's original intention was to call him Sixth.
He was just going to call him Sixth,
right?
And
he's like, that would be confusing, so I can't do that.
It's kind of a hard word to say sometimes. You can say it a lot of times.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay. But anyway, so they find the machine, and he's the one realizing from his trapper skill set that it can't be too easy. If it's too easy, there's a problem. Something's wrong. And he's learned that through his, knowledge of... Okay, which brings me to my main parallel, and I'm a huge fan of parallels in Brandon Sanderson.
I'm excited.
Of the concept that the whole thing is the off-worlders saying that this world, that I forgot its name too. What's the world called?
You're going to throw that on me?
You know everything about Brandon Sanderson.
I know.
Okay.
I'm going to pull it up while you're talking.
But the world itself is not evolved or ready, right, for people to come in and trade and take advantage.
Yeah,
and do
it's
all
not
this.
old enough. Not
exactly,
advanced
it's still
enough.
developing. However,
the Dromenad system.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's not what the world is called,
I don't
right?
know. It's the system, though. I don't know what the world's called. Dromad.
Dromad?
Sure.
But it's just cool to see. I think the parallel to that is, this world isn't developed enough. However, Sixth or Dusk is developed enough to know what's going on. It's kind of like him in his own world, having lived his life with his own struggles and challenges, just like everyone else, right? He's lived on this, on Patchy, and it's his responsibility to continue to develop. And there are a lot of things that he needs to figure out as a trapper, because everything's trying to kill him. The island's even trying to kill him with all these dangerous things.
Right.
And as a human being, you go through those experiences and you grow into just a perceptive person, right? Someone who's developed enough that they can handle life and deal with challenges. That's no different on a planet like the outworld people who are coming in to potentially trade with them, probably take advantage of them, but they dealt with the same things when they were growing up. So I think what's interesting to me is there's a little bit of a parallel there in the sense that the development of a human being is not necessarily dependent on the technological advances of the time. People developed 1,000 years ago here on Earth, and whether it's an alien species or whatever, that human condition, I think, is a very important part of what Brandon Sanderson writes, in the sense that people develop within their circumstances to be the best versions of themselves that they can be, and that's not hampered by a lack of technology or magic, which I think is really cool. So I think that's one of the things that I liked about Dusk overall and his character.
So you're basically saying that people, no matter if they're super advanced or not, they can be at an equal level within themselves.
Yeah, like a street smart kind of, but fully developed, fully cognizant of just taking a situation, an environment, and making the most of it. I think that's something that people can just have.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like you said, the best example from this is just when Dusk takes the information that he's learned and applies it to new technology.
Exactly. And it's technology obviously he's never seen before. He doesn't know what's happening. It's completely unique and novel, but he's able to be like, okay, we can figure this out because I've dealt with challenges and this is just a new challenge.
Yeah. And I want to jump back from this because it connects. But just the way that this whole world is presented is incredible. So the way that he has birds that have different powers. Like Sanderson, again, every single time I read a story from him, it is just completely new. I just love that.
And they just dump you straight into it, like, this is all normal. Like, just go with the program. This is how things are here.
I see my body in the water over there, in the grass over there, just everywhere. You're like, this is kind of like ominous and creepy, but also super cool. Like, a bird
and it's super normal to him. Like, he's seen his own corpse thousands of times, and it's like, oh, yep, don't climb that tree.
Yep,
okay, got it.
We're good. We're good.
Crazy.
Yeah, I love that. And even the way that this book begins is so mysterious and ominous by how
does it start? Now I'm trying to remember.
He's paddling in his boat, and then he has this huge, like, dark, like, shadow appear in the water, and it's one of the deep monsters. Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, oh shoot, I've never seen one of these things. They're super dangerous. Like, I just hope it ignores me. And then he decides to, like, look in the water anyways to see if he can see what it looks like.
It's like, I just wanted to see it. But it just that setting really establishes, like, it's ominous, it's scary, it's a dangerous place. They live on islands, they're very isolated. Like, just all of the things that you can convey in just an opening scene. I wonder if that's a part of the writing process. We should note that down for a question for Brandon Sanderson. Like, is a part of the process, like, crafting that opening scene to convey as much detail and just backdrop for the story's emotional state? Because you have to be in a certain state to read Way of Kings, or a certain state to read Six of the Dusk. And that first scene, the first 100 words, their whole job is to put you into that emotional state so you can get the most out of and understand the most from the story.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's like analyzing. I mean, I didn't think I would be doing this when I was back in English class in high school.
Well, it sets you up. That's probably why it's called, like, a setting. Like, it gets you in the setting. Like, I don't know. It's pretty cool. Like, that that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. This whole book gives a vibe. You probably haven't seen it, but maybe you've seen at least commercials for it. Have you ever heard of the movie Annihilation?
I haven't.
Yeah, is this movie, like, at least from the trailer, you'd be able to gather that it is there.
You can gather a lot from the title.
Yeah. It's all these scientists exploring, like, this area of the world that has just transformed, like, these animals into crazy creatures that are attacking the people, and, like, it's just a really, really creepy, ominous, like, movie.
Okay.
And that is how, like, what I feel when I get from this is just very like creepy, ominous, like
Yeah.
island that everything's trying to kill them. I have like the like Annihilation music in my head as I'm like as I'm reading this, which is just crazy. So that's what I get when I read this book, and that's why I just enjoyed it. It was just a very different kind of story that I've read before.
I think it was a great story for me. I love that it was short. I love that it was punchy and impactful. Why? Okay, can you answer the question now? Why is everyone saying that Six of the Dusk Part 2 is the next book?
Yeah, so first of all, I think Brandon Sanderson read the first chapter of this book back in Dragonsteel of 2023.
Last year's Dragonsteel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he's like, this is a book I've been working on. And then he read the first chapter, and it had to do with like the Sixth of Dusk stuff.
Interesting.
And then he also says that this is going to be a very far future Cosmere book and very high Cosmere book, so lots of connections. And the Sixth of Dusk specifically says in the very beginning, like, this takes place way far after all of the other books have taken place. That we
I didn't know that that this part of it is also in the future.
Yeah.
I didn't make that connection. You said it says that in the beginning, probably in like the prologue?
Yeah.
Man, I should have paid more attention to that
Yeah,
prologue.
so he mentions that, and so it makes sense that he's on these islands, and then people who have space capabilities and space travel are the ones that are coming to visit. And so I feel like it has to do something with that, like those communities, Six of Dusk. Maybe it's not even Six of Dusk like specifically, but it's just those worlds that they're on, and I don't know.
I'm very curious.
Has some sort of connection.
And that is a big question that I have just swirling around. Is the concept of interstellar travel in the Cosmere is going to be a very interesting puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
The reason for that is there's a lot of different factors that I think about. One of them is there are people who are capable of transporting themselves to different planets. From different stories and whatever, right?
I don't know if but I think they're doing it through Shadesmar from what we understand. For the most part.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other hand, you read books like Alloy of Law or Mistborn Era 2, where you learn that because of the concept of investiture and power and how these powers interact with each other, their standard technological development is hampered, right? That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And that's something that when you think about interstellar travel requires a lot of innovation and technology and all these advances, where they rely so much, and the most powerful planets, the most powerful civilizations rely even more and more on just the concept of investiture and how the magic system works.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how they plan on tackling that hurdle of how do you get a people that is really not that interested in technology, to be fair, to space travel. And not only space travel, but like galactic travel.
I would argue that it's not all the societies that are not interested in technology. I think it was just more just the Mistborn era because Harmony made it too easy for them, and they were just didn't really need to. But you look in the Roshar world, you get people, they're making advancements all the time with their fabrials and everything, and they're
hold on, because those advancements are all based on Stormlight.
But that's okay. I think that's fine. Right?
Okay.
Because they're using that to create more technology. It's kind of like using electricity to make like better technology now, right? Like it's just their form of power.
While I would say yes, technically,
yeah,
I have a hard time reconciling the issue of they're utilizing a force that just comes to them.
Yeah.
Stormlight.
So you're saying it can't get it from another
exactly. So
location.
let's say like electricity is a good example because kinetic energy can be converted into electricity. It's a very like standard process. Whereas Stormlight, they just have to wait for it to come.
Yep.
From the storm. So let's say they're trying to travel a planet and they run out of Stormlight.
And
they're kind of screwed.
That it's hard to take Stormlight away from the planet. Like there's like run into barriers with that.
Interesting.
I think they mentioned that in one of the
that would be an interesting one to read again. But yeah, so in general, I think it's similar, but the reliance on an individual planet's specialized power versus like a standard force, like investiture, I guess would be a standard force where it sounds like investiture can grow within a person naturally. That could maybe be something, but I don't know.
It sounds like the Scadrians would probably have the least problem with that, the people from Mistborn world, because it's just metal.
Yeah.
They just have to have the right metals with them.
Yeah.
And so they can use that. And we even saw an example in... They're spoilers for these other books. We're talking
in Bands of Morning?
Yeah, in Sunlit Man. at the
Silent
end.
Man has a lot of good examples of all these things. It's
Yeah.
a really good little
and you're able to
scattering
use
of-
it on another planet, right? And they have the Scadrians using it at the very end. Remember when like he gets pushed by the Scadrial people from Scadrial? But
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But I mean, Nomad from there is one of the main reasons I've been thinking about that. So
see, and he's able to use it somehow there. Yeah, crazy.
that's what's very curious.
Yeah.
So
well, we still
we will
basically
learn
what
a
you're
lot.
saying is we don't know much.
there are a
about
lot of
how you can
open
travel
questions. The good news is I have a lot of confidence that Brandon Sanderson is going to help us resolve these peacefully.
Oh yeah, and that's probably what this new book will like get into quite a bit too. If it's gonna be far future like Cosmere, it's gotta start.
And we'll
touching
find
on
out
some of that.
soon. What, like 4 days?
Oh yeah, he's
Till the
gonna give us
reading?
at least a title and
Yeah.
the first chapter.
Title and first
Are
chapter.
you gonna read the first chapter, or are you gonna wait to read it all at once?
That is a really good question. I don't know if I have a good answer because
We should
I've
probably
been
do
able
it
to
just for the channel at least.
I will probably read it at least for this channel. It's a
I know.
good call.
'Cause
We're
I was gonna
excited.
say-
A couple more days.
I know it's hard because I've never done that. Like with all the other ones, I just kind of left it because I'm like, I'll wait until I read the book. But we're
gotta
doing a
do it.
channel now.
We gotta
man.
react
We're doing a
to
channel.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It'll be great. A couple more days. We'll see you in that one.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Okay, so we didn't just read Sixth of the Dusk.
That's true.
We also
We put in the work.
Yes.
We're putting in the work so that we have
All
something
the
to
work.
talk about in this channel.
We did. We also read The Emperor's Soul.
Oof.
Again, for your first time.
Yep.
And
You'd read this before, though, right?
I'd also read this one before. This book, fun fact, is the Hugo Award winner for that year that was written for, I think, short stories or something like that.
That's cool.
But it is a very good book.
I really liked this one.
Yeah, tell me about
So
it.
the first thing that I want to mention, and the coolest connection that I made, and when Brandon Sanderson has a chat about it at the end, kind of.
Yeah.
But my dad was in consulting, so he traveled a lot. And one of the gifts that I got from my parents, because they would, go on trips and we'd stay with my grandparents, was a stamp of my name from China.
No way.
Yeah, it's a jade stamp. It's about this tall. It has a figurine on the top, and it's square.
And you have that stamp right here to show us all. How cool would that be?
I did look for it.
Yeah.
It's in the problem is it's
I
in
would
the
have been
garage.
blown away if
Yeah,
you would.
I will show it to you
Yeah.
as soon as I find it. I'm still looking for it.
Yeah.
But I didn't lose it, Mom. I have it. It's in the garage, and I will find it.
But a jade stamp.
It's a jade stamp. It has the ink on the bottom of it. There's a little ink pad. It's more like a little pillow, honestly. But it's red. The ink is red.
Yeah.
And I just was like, that's this. That's like the whole time. This is what was in my mind.
So you knew exactly what this looked like.
Oh yeah, I was
so
like
cool.
100. Well, because they're talking about it was a red stamp and it was like so big and they stamp it in. And I'm like, yeah, and it's like the name, it's the person's name. So all the concept of that was just like so cool to me because I'm like, I feel like I know exactly what they're talking about because of that little stamp that I have. And at the end, he mentions that in traveling Asia, he talks about those stamps, and those are like a part of the culture there.
Yeah.
And that some people would just stamp their name onto random relics, which is kind of weird.
I thought that was awesome.
But yeah, I thought that was really cool. That was a cool connection. I'm like, hey, I know this. I know exactly what they're talking about. It was
Wow,
cool.
that is really, really cool.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, I really like the story as well, just because, again, every single time I read a new short story or any new series from Sanderson, the magic systems are just so unique. They're just so different from everything that I've read. And this story is just special, again, because it has its own rules of just like how precise you have to be and like how much research. This person, he's basically made, I was thinking about this a lot, he's basically made these forgers the ultimate biographers, and I just think about some of the biographies that I've read by I think Walter Isaacson, who did the Steve Jobs book. Have you read Steve Jobs?
And the Elon Musk new one.
And Elon Musk. Have you read Steve Jobs? Can't remember. Okay, but if just having read his book, I get the sense of what he was trying to convey, of how she was crafting the Emperor's soul and he was learning everything about them. And I'm like, man, that must be what Walter Isaacson feels like when he's learning all about Steve Jobs. And by the end of that book, I really felt like, I feel like I knew Steve Jobs and who he was. But she had to even go another step farther to know, even know him better than he knew himself, which is very, very cool.
And it makes you think what elements of your past to this point have created you. And obviously every little thing that happens to you has a minor impact, but what body of knowledge and information and experience has created the person that you are.
Yeah.
I think
Everything
that's
up
cool.
to this moment.
Yeah.
And then how do you perceive things about yourself that are probably didn't happen that exact way, that influence you in ways that you didn't know?
But your lens on the world is very unique. And I think that's why it was so difficult for her to do that work. So the concept of forgery was a really cool one for me in this book.
Yeah.
Because I was waiting for this reveal and it never happened. And I was like, oh, man. Because I was really expecting her to come out and be like, everything that humans create is a forgery. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The original painting was a forgery. Right?
Yeah. Well, you're saying it's a forgery because... Oh, yeah, that she made. Yeah,
No.
What are you saying?
The original created by the first artist was a forgery, right? Because... Now I will give you my own Sanderlanche.
Okay.
Because it was a scene of the world. It was a picture of the world, right?
Yeah.
It was his best forgery of that moment in time that he was trying to convey and replicate and freeze into this canvas.
Yes,
right?
I see where you're going.
So it's a forgery of real life. Nothing is inherently new creation, right? They're all different forgeries and different elements of it. Like she duplicated a painting, but his painting was a duplication of a night scene. Yep. So it's all an element of recreation and copy and adding creativity to that, and her ability to duplicate that but change it or kind of remaster it in her own way while it's technically a forgery is no different than the original creation. And I thought that was fantastic. And I really thought they were going to come out with that as like all human creation is technically forgery.
Yeah.
But it didn't. I was hoping for it. That was my own little like, oh, that's so cool.
Yep. Well, I mean, that sounds like something Wit would come to a conclusion with at the end of the book.
Exactly.
He almost says that,
Wit.
right? Yeah. He almost says that at the end of the book. He's like, what do people value most is like, what is novelty?
Yes. Like, you don't have to do something cool. You just have to do something cool first.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And that's what this story
Wit is an interesting guy.
Yeah.
That's a really cool connection. Where'd you grab that out of nowhere? You're right.
Look at me. That's what I'm here for.
That's a really good apt reference to it because he does have that fun conversation. Like, what's the most important thing?
Yeah. Do people care if somebody does art like that's beautiful? But what if somebody else copies that same art just as beautiful? Doesn't really matter.
The first person
who did it.
the novelty. I thought that was cool, and like the concept of forgery in general, and how like she loves her art and skill. But I'm really interested to see, is this like a potential seed for a continuation story, as in like the concept of these essences and these stamps are going to continue, or is it really its own closed off short story?
I think it was originally intended to be its own like closed off story, but we'll see if they end up making more.
Seems like he can't help himself from drawing back
into
old stories.
We'll see.
I'm sure he creates this little like world, and he's like, oh, I just want to go back and write more and build more on that same thing.
Well, it's interesting. So this whole story takes place on the world of like Elantris, that takes place for the book Elantris.
And I haven't read that.
You haven't read it. But
is it very similar to this?
No, it's completely different, which is wild. And so this doesn't spoil anything for you, but in the beginning it talks about how there are like 2 or 3 different nations that have no idea that any of each other exist. And I think that
doesn't it mention it somewhere in there, like the planet facilitates this somehow?
Yeah.
Like whether it's the geography or something, but it's like they just really have no connection.
No connection or anything. Yeah, and I think it's because those shards were splintered by odium or something like that.
And it's one of the largest planets or something like that.
Yeah. All these fun
It's
facts.
1.5 Cosmere standard.
Yeah, hey, there you go. Important.
Well, I remember thinking like, who decided what the Cosmere standard was?
I know, I'm like, it's got to be the average size. That's what I would
how
do.
Many planets? How do you know you've got them all?
That's hilarious. Well, the guy who's doing it, he's done a lot of research.
You should probably do a median, though. If I know anything about statistics.
You'd rather do a median to do what the 1.5 Cosmere standard is? So you're going to say one of the planets is exactly a 1?
Yes. You'd rather have no planet in the solar system be a 1? None at all? Every single one's 1.02. You can't have a 1. Nobody?
Yeah, but who gets to decide whose planet's the 1?
The median. Because think about this. If you have a bunch of numbers that are effectively randomly distributed across a normalized distribution, the median is going to make the most sense because it gets rid of all the outliers. You have one supernova massive planet, and then you have to, maybe one tiny little rock that's another planet with ants living on it. You don't want to use those for your average. It's going to mess everything up. You use the median.
Jaden, you sound like you are arguing for the imperial system of measurement versus the metric system.
What? The metric system.
Like, everything should be based off of a foot. Somebody's foot. And this will be the normal foot that we use.
Okay, well, riddle me this, Marty. Who decided how much a kilogram weighs?
Exactly. That's why you use the average, because it's just a size that makes sense, that is in the middle.
That's not how the kilogram was decided, and that's metric. The kilogram, there's literally a weight in a safe somewhere in England that is exactly 1 kilogram.
Fun fact, I did not know this.
It's true.
This is very cool. So how did they decide that was 1 kilogram?
So
and why did
I have heard people say...
Okay, go ahead.
I have heard people say that it's like the weight of exactly 1 cubic foot of water. I don't know if I believe that, though. Could be wrong. But I do know that there is a weight somewhere.
Man,
there is a standard weight.
Some chemist is going to wreck us in the comics.
That's, you know what? It's inevitable. I have to share my truth and then be told that it's not actually the truth.
That's right.
But otherwise, how will we learn anything, right? If we don't put ourselves out there and tell people random incorrect information.
It's great. It's great. Why didn't they do that with a foot and then just multiply everything by 10 from that point? Why do we have to do 3 for...
Oh, the 12s and that is just... It's insane. And the 6s... But that's time. Who did that with time? 60 minutes, 12 hours? What? Or 24 hours? It just doesn't make any sense.
I feel like there's got to be a mathematical reason for that, though, because it does add up to how many...
No matter what reason is not going to be good enough, because we still have leap years. Like... Who decided on... Okay, no, it was probably the Romans who decided on 12 months, which is its own level of confusing.
Yeah.
Because you're like 365 days. Great, that divides really well by like a 5.
Yeah.
Or maybe a 3. Not even a 3. But it's like, why not have, I don't know, a number of months that would actually fit?
Was it the book Project Hail Mary? You haven't read this, but they kind of like mentioned that counting systems could be developed based off of like how many fingers or like whatever appendages that people or species have on different planets and things like that. And
I actually
influence that type of thing.
I think that makes sense because you're like 10 fingers. Our whole system is base 10.
Yep,
that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyways,
I can get behind
stuff.
That. I can get behind that.
Great book too. You got to read that one someday. But, anyways. Where were we?
So I honestly don't remember.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. 1.5 Cosmere standard.
1.5 Cosmere standard.
Don't forget that's how big the planet is that we don't even remember what it's called.
Yeah. That one, is it Cell?
So there's the system, which is in the book.
Oh, yeah. We always keep saying the system, because that's just way easier because it just has it in the title there. So... Yeah, Arcanum Unbounded lists the system as cellish system.
So you're right, it's cell. Totally right.
Cell.
Nailed it first try. We can cut out all of the... We won't, though, because I'm not going to find this later in the edit.
But, yeah, so anyways, book was great. So I was going back to Elantris. Elantris, it's a different people, from what I understand. Kill me
so
in the
it's one of the
comments,
other
okay?
3? Or other 2?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But, yeah, so it takes one place with one of the people, so you don't see any of this type of magic system in there. It's completely different.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, because a magic system you would think is developed by the natural environment they live in, like think of Stormlight.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it's developed by the people?
Well, it always has to do with the gods that were on the planet, right?
The shards.
The shards, yeah. And so they're splintered. Kind of like Honor was splintered.
But the power still existed, is what they're saying, right?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of learning about the shards that were splintered on Roshar, that they're like the true Spren are like splinters of Honor or something like that. Anyways, very interesting.
Which makes sense why they're like, but Spren kind of linked to Shadesmar, which is across the whole Cosmere, right?
Okay, so now we're getting into this, which I really wanted to get into after this book, for this book, because this is crazy. So I was always fascinated by the idea that there's a physical realm. There's a physical realm, a cognitive realm, and a spiritual realm in all of these books. And we don't really hear much about the spiritual realm in all the books until now. And he even mentions it at the end of this book that he's like, I didn't want to make it seem too similar to soul casting, but it totally has that kind of same idea.
It's one level deeper.
Yeah. And it just made me realize, like, okay, that's how soul casting works. Like, Shallan's talking to the stick and says, like, you have to convince it that it's something else. And it was super convinced that it was still a stick. But that's the same idea with the stamps. Mm-hmm. You have to convince something that it's something else.
Yep.
And you have to be convincing of it. And it's, I don't know, to me it seems there's got to be overlap with that kind of thing.
I love that they added in that element of rules where you can't just convince anything of anything. It has to be like a plausible alternate reality, which, you start thinking about. Like, we're talking potentially multiverse style realities where you're like pulling essences from the spiritual realm that exist.
True.
Maybe in a parallel style of existence.
Wow.
But yeah, a little string theory for you.
I didn't even realize this was multiverse. You're right. It could be.
It's at least the fact that there are infinite possibilities of what could have happened.
Yeah.
And that she's drawing from those possibilities to create a future that she likes.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So anyways, the book was great. I love the magic system. I love just how she has to go through this book is more about learning about people and how they act and how deep they are and how deep people's histories are and just how everything has a history and that influences everything. We kind of mentioned that earlier, but I think that book's really cool.
And all in just a few hours. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, pretty amazing. So did you have any other comments on this book?
No, that was it.
So I want to give an overall review for the 2 books that we read.
Okay.
So first off, I want to hear your thoughts overall on Sixth of the Dusk.
Okay, I'm thinking Sixth of the Dusk was really good. A bit of an eerie story, a fun journey, and a great reveal. I'm trying to decide whether our same novel style review is the same. Can you equate a novella at an 8 to a novel at an 8?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say they're probably in their own category, huh?
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That helps. That really helps because I'm comparing these to other novellas.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, how would this compare to Words of Radiance? It's only 2 hours
oh.
long. So
yeah.
Okay, good to know. I would say then for Sixth of the Dusk, I would give it probably an 8.1.
Okay. Wow.
It's the low 8s, but it made the 8s just barely.
How does it compare for Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell?
Shadows for Silence, did we have a rating for that?
Yeah, I can't remember what we gave it. But
Pretty sure mine was in the 7s.
Really? I can't remember. But so you think it was better than Shadows for Silence?
I do.
Okay, why?
Yep. I think I liked it because of the way the story was told a little bit more. And there was a little bit more nuance to that story. There's things happening that you just don't understand and you will understand. You know that there's something behind it. You just don't know why. Whereas if you think about the shades and other things from Shadows for Silence, it was a little bit more just one person, an outlaw, versus this enemy force.
Yeah.
Very similar stories, I guess, in the
it
sense
does feel
of their
similar.
setting. But I thought this one was just better in its storytelling.
Very cool. Okay. For me, I probably would have to agree with you that I like Sixth of Dusk better than Shadows for Silence. I would probably give the Sixth of Dusk probably an 8.5.
Okay.
Yeah, I really like that story. I think it's really fun. I think it's one of those that you get excited that you could share with someone and just here's a really good taste of what Sanderson is like.
Yeah.
And you could get her
It's true.
A quick punch in the face of everything of his stories.
So an overall rating of an 8.3, which is a very much would recommend.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good little intro to Brandon Sanderson too.
Yeah.
Because the reveal at the end, it's own
awesome
excitement. Yeah, I like that.
Yep. Then the next one, The Emperor's Soul. What did you think?
The Emperor's Soul I have at get this, 9.2.
Wow, that is solid.
It's a really solid. For a novella, really solid. I thought it was so you will notice throughout my ratings, books that make me really think and ponder and try to figure out connections to are my favorites.
Yep.
In general. So that's why I got such a high rating. Because it was I made these connections. I got to think about obviously real stuff like the stamp that I have, all of that. All of those connections start to build on each other. And I think that's a cool way to tell a story. It's a cool way to just experience a story. It's a 9.2 for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that story as well. I'll give it a 9. So
nice.
Yeah.
It still made it to the 9s.
Still in the 9s. That is a great short story. Again, another amazing story for someone to start with to get into Sanderson and just realize what he's all about, how quickly he can build a world and keep it very engaging.
Yep.
Learn about a world, learn about people. Sanderson has a very good grasp on
people,
on people.
Human condition.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's amazing.
Hugo liked that book too.
Yeah. Hugo was a fan.
He gave it his award. So that's all you need.
It's a big deal. Big deal. Yeah. Well, awesome. I think that's our rankings there.
Hold on. So that 9.1 is going to be our final rating, right there in between 9.0 and 9.2.
So the best of all the short stories that we've read so far
is Emperor's Soul.
Emperor's
We've
Soul.
only read 3.
Yeah. I mean, we both have read Mistborn: A Secret History. Do we want to throw out
I want to read it again. I want to read it again. That's something I want to reread after Bands of Mourning because I hadn't read any of Era 2 before that.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Coming up.
Wait, you're going to read it after Bands of Mourning or before? Or after?
Next. I'll probably read it next.
Yeah, before Bands of Mourning. No, before the next one, Lost Metal. Yeah. Okay, cool. Sounds good. Look forward to it. We're going to jump into that.
Don't forget to subscribe so you see it.